What if Johnny had beaten Daniel in the Season 4 tournament-style fight in Cobra Kai? It's all Man Maniac, and let's hop into it. So let's look up why they even had the fight in the first place, and this is because when Terry Silver was back, Daniel decided that Miyagi-Do should be the way forward for all students, as it's what he used to beat Barnes in the Karate Kid Part 3. However, Johnny believed that it might not work this time round, and that sometimes the same thing doesn't work twice. However, they then got into an argument in which Johnny said, "You think that because you beat me by one kick, 1 point on one day, that you're better than me, and that if we fought 10 times, you all know that I'd have won 9. And then he said, "So why don't we have a fight?" And then he thought that Daniel would back out of it and just say, "Alright, we'll learn both styles." But then Daniel said, "Alright, you're on." So really, it's settling this age-old dispute over who was better, about the Karate Kid controversy to do with Daniel's kick being allegedly illegal, but it technically wasn't, because face contact wasn't described as not allowed, except if it was intentional. And then they decided to have the fight to decide who would actually get to take over the kids' training. It's kind of the philosophy that whoever was superior on that day had the superior method of learning karate, and therefore would be the best option for trying to take down Cobra Kai. Ultimately, the match ended in a draw. However, Daniel and Johnny, instead of leaving things the way they were, decided that they would split up and become 2 separate dojos. This was also due to the fact that they had a disagreement over how to deal with Hawk's mohawk being cut off, as this happened shortly after the match was declared a draw. But what if Johnny had won the final point? Supposing he managed to swoop Daniel before Daniel could land a hit, or he just landed the hit before Daniel. But either way, he managed to somehow score the final point and win. What would have happened? I personally believe that due to Hawk coming back with his mohawk cut off, that wouldn't have been affected by who won or lost the match. So that would have still happened, and we would have still seen Hawk with his mohawk cut off and sad and low confidence. And they'd still partly argue over what to do about it, but this time Johnny would say, "I'm taking over training now, so it's up to me." He may then go and confront Silver early, and what kind of happened when he went to confront him about Robbie would have happened earlier on in the season, and Johnny would have ended up being beaten up. Then Daniel may have found him later on, realising what had happened, and said, "See, this is why you can't strike first with that guy." Then Johnny would have decided, "You know what, I might take some of what you say on board, but I'm still going to lead the training." So it would be Johnny leading training, and Daniel would maybe behind the scenes try and convince some of the students to tell Johnny to let them learn Miyagi-Do, or still teach some Miyagi-Do secretly without Johnny knowing. However, Johnny would make a huge effort to ensure that Daniel and Miguel don't become closer than he is to Miguel, because he wants that relationship to be reserved just for him and Miguel. There'd be characters like Sam would develop more offensive techniques of karate like she already does in Season 4 of Cobra Kai. This wouldn't have really helped her that much since she learned from Johnny and still didn't manage to beat Tori. And I believe that the battle with Sam versus Tori was more of a mental thing than it was a physical battle. I think skills-wise they were pretty similar, but I just think that Sam had a lot of confliction, especially with Juan Miguel leaving. That would have had some effect on her, and also the fact that she was now seeing that there were other ways apart from what her father had said, but still having pressure to learn Miyagi-Do and not use offense. And then even though they teamed up at the end, Johnny and Daniel, it was all kind of up in the air, and the instability, I think, affected Sam and threw her off her game. I still see Cobra Kai winning the tournament regardless, because they were learning both styles as well, and they'd already know how to counter their own moves, and would have probably covered bases by saying that, Silver must have told the students, or Kreese, that Johnny knew Cobra Kai, and to be ready for that. So I don't think it would have really affected their chance of winning, and if anything they'd have done slightly worse if they only learned offense. However, I'm unsure then as to whether Hawk would have joined Miyagi-Do, or whether he'd have had to join Eagle Fang, since Daniel would have to take a back seat. I feel like what would have happened is they would all just compete under one dojo, and whether they decide in the end to work things out and become an incorporated dojo, Miyagi Fang, or Eagle Do, or Miyagi Eagles, or something like that, and they would all just compete under one dojo. This would be significant, because if Hawk managed to get his confidence back like he did normally, then there's a good chance that Hawk would win, boosting the points, and due to them having more students, they may have done better in the skills competition, meaning that the tournament would have been closer than it actually was in the series, and hence there was a chance that Miyagi-Do, Miyagi Fang, or Miyagi Eagles, whatever they decide to be, would actually end up winning overall. If this happened, then they wouldn't have to shut down and we'd have a different season 5, with potentially Chris still going to jail, potentially not, but more importantly, it would be Silver having to call someone in to try and shut down Miyagi-Do, or Miyagi-Fang, or Miyagi-Eagles, instead of it being the other way around with Chosen being brought in as reinforcement. I still think Hawk would go through this character arc, because his confidence would still be lost after his mohawk being cut off, and I still see Demetrius trying to stand by his friend, and he'd just say, I'm not doing it anymore, and Dimitri would still give him a pep talk, but it would just be about the Miyagi Eagles as opposed to Eagle Fang or Miyagi-Do. As I see, if there was one winner, I see the two dojos staying together instead of splitting, and potentially they work things out earlier on and join together to become one big dojo. I don't see Daniel saying, well, I'm splitting anyway and doing Eagle Fang. I'm doing Miyagi-Do, sorry, not Eagle Fang. I'm doing Miyagi-Do and come on students, because there was a clear winner. Whereas when they withdrew, there was no kind of, alright, a deal's a deal. It was, they both technically won and lost, so they technically both take over training. So that's why they decided to split, and the argument. I believe that had Johnny won, then Daniel would have probably made similar excuses to what Johnny makes to this day about the Yellow Valley tournament, saying, you know, it was an illegal sweep, it was a foul or whatever, but the students would back Johnny and say, no, he did actually win. But taking a back seat, Daniel would try to, at first, listen and be a part of it, but he would eventually resort to secretly teaching Miyagi-Do, or trying to manipulate the students into manipulating Johnny to allow Miyagi-Do to also be incorporated. But I do think that they would eventually get into an argument, realise that they've got to work this out, especially if Johnny did confront Silver, got beaten up, and then Daniel came to help him afterwards and get over it. He would say, yeah, you're right, we can't strike fast with this guy, and it could have maybe worked things out and smoothed things over. And had this happened, I feel like the main reason why Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang lost the tournament to Cobra Kai is because Cobra Kai had so many more students, meaning their chances of making the finals for the girls and boys competition was a lot higher, because Eagle Fang had to rely on one student making the girls final, whereas Cobra Kai had like 6 or 7 different girls at least, and that was still more than what Miyagi-Do had. Also, that having more students would have meant they'd got more total points in the skills competition, which would have already boosted them higher up than the other dojos. And for that reason, I believe that had they have joined forces, Daniel and Johnny, and been one dojo, they stood a much greater chance at winning and would have potentially won the tournament, and Cobra Kai would then be on the receiving end trying to come back in season 5. That's gonna wrap it up for today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to drop us a like down below, and I'll try and make an alternate version of what if Daniel had won and see if things turn out differently, which I don't think they really would, but it'd be fun to have a look at it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye. Also, special shout out to Anne the Avatar for giving me the idea for this video. She be walking by my side, so don't do it for the next time. But she's too trying to walk